And we are live with another edition of the All Gas No Break Sports Show. I am one of your co-hosts, Nicholas Pavona, joined alongside as always by my co-host Andrew Johnson, as we are now into the Sweet 16 of this year's NCAA tournament. And Johnson, compared to years past, we haven't had much upsets that we've had in recent memory. We've had more of a quote-unquote chalk tournament, as people like to call it this season around. But there still has been some drama these last couple of days, especially happening in the second round of the NCAA tournament. And as I mentioned, we are now into the Sweet 16 with those games kicking off on Thursday and Friday as we get one step closer to crowning a national champion.
Yeah, like you said, it's been a very lackluster tournament. We did have a couple upsets. Unfortunately, my Johnny's among them. Surprise, surprise. But I only picked them to go to the Sweet 16 anyway. I guess we'll get the St. John stuff out of the way now. Going into the season, if you had told us that we would win one NCAA tournament game, we would be happy. However, plans do change, and I think the consensus was Sweet 16 was better, was a success. But if you had told me I could pick going to the Sweet 16 or winning the Big East Championship regular season and tournament, I think I'd pick the latter. I don't know about you.
I think if we went and if you told me before the season we were going to win the Big East in the regular season and in the tournament and get a number 2 seed in the NCAA tournament, you at least win a game. Obviously, losing and the way that they lost to Arkansas was not fun. I mean, they couldn't really shoot in that game. Arkansas gave them a lot of chances in that one to come back and win that game, but we just couldn't make any outside shots, which really hurt them. A lot of missed layups as well in the first half. RJ Lewis, unfortunately, having the worst game of his entire season, maybe his entire career. So that wasn't really it was an unfortunate way to go out. Guys like Kadari Richmond, who really played great towards the end of the season, they go out, unfortunately, with that loss, stinging. You're hoping to bring back guys like Lewis and Ejiofor next season and a lot of other key players, as well as, making sure that they go hand in hand in this transfer portal coming up. It's already kicking off so far. And it's crazy to think that there's current players that are still in the NCAA tournament that are transferring right now at this moment. But that is indeed the case for a couple players. And that's the world of college basketball we live in. The portal still kicks off no matter what time of the year it is in March. And for St. John's fans like us, we're going to be looking to see what they do in the portal, because the biggest concern that really plagued them this entire season was outside shooting, and they really need that if they're going to go further in the NCAA tournament for the years to come.
Yeah, and I didn't want to say Arkansas is not your typical 10 seed. Remember, they were missing Boogie Fland for a large portion of the year.
Yeah.
And with him back, they're just a completely different team. It wouldn't surprise me if they make the Elite Eight right now, but we'll go into those games in a little bit.
Yeah, I think you and I both agree. Once we saw the matchup for 7 and 10, we said to ourselves, it's not going to be an easy game to get past, no matter who it is.
It's definitely not. And it's not like they were not your typical 7-10 seed.
Yeah.
I would venture to say that 7-10 matchup was the strongest 7-10
Probably
matchup.
the best.
The other ones, you have Marquette, which St. John's beat 3 times, 2 of them handily. They beat New Mexico, which was the other 10 seed. So, and the other 7-10 matchup obviously was Kansas, Arkansas.
You had Utah, the other 7-10,
Utah and
UCLA.
Yeah, Utah State and UCLA, and UCLA got absolute dog walked by New Mexico. So you have to assume that they're not the strongest matchup, and Utah State got absolutely blown out. And the other 7-10 was St. Mary's and Vanderbilt.
Yes.
So this was obviously the strongest 7-10 seed. Now, we're going to talk about the seeding a little bit. We said it was a little wonky. It turns out number 8, Louisville, got absolutely manhandled by Creighton.
Yep.
We were not expecting that. I was expecting Louisville to handily win that game, and Creighton just came up. They shot the lights off.
I'm not surprised how that game went, in the sense of, I think after losing a game like they did again in the ACC championship game, I wasn't expecting them to lose by double digits. I thought they would be a little bit closer. I was more I think I wasn't surprised that Creighton won. I liked Creighton in this game. It was more of, I think, obviously having the home field, the home court advantage for Louisville definitely helped in that aspect of things. But they also never really played well in Rupp Arena, no matter, even if, it's in this case a neutral site game. And they just really got out of the gates really slow, and they never really recovered from it.
Yeah, so let's go into I don't want to drag on all these games right here, so we'll just briefly go over around the 64. Michigan wins a tight one versus UC San Diego. A&M stars off Yale. The upset, both those were single-digit scores. Ole Miss was blowing the doors off UNC, and then they ends up we end up winning the game 71-64. That was a
Yeah.
that score is not indicative of what this game was. This was all Ole Miss for the first 30 minutes, and UNC really came to life. They had a chance and they kind of blew it. Would have been interesting to see them because now we have Ole Miss in the Sweet 16 now. So
The
spoiler
only
alert.
really upsets we really had that you could really expect. We
I
kind of
called all of
expect.
them.
We really pretty much expected it going into
I mean, we do an
this week.
upset per round
Yeah,
and or per region,
per
I should
region.
say,
Yeah,
and we called all of them, all four upsets. If it
then
wasn't
the
even
only
an
one was the
upset in the East
East.
region,
I don't. Was there an upset in the East region that I'm thinking about it? No, right?
no, there are no upsets in the East. The East,
I
you
think the
had
East. I think the East upset was New Mexico. No, not Mexico. I'm
no,
sorry.
there's none.
No,
It
there
was a
wasn't
complete
any of the
chalk
East.
bracket.
Yeah, yeah. I think, and we even got each one of us got the one in the West region, which we had
Yeah, you
Colorado
picked
State,
Colorado
which
State and
who
Drake.
was a favorite in that game. We expected that. Drake was an underdog, but a slight underdog to Missouri. And you had also McNeese in the Midwest region knocking off Clemson.
Worst
And that
kept
game,
secret.
also was weird because McNeese was dominating them defensively in the first half of that game. And then I don't know what happened the second half defensively. They just really struggled. Thankfully for them, they barely held on to win that game. But their tournament run, unfortunately, came down to an end as well. We'll talk about that in the second round. But yeah, there wasn't much, drama in the first
And
round of
obviously New
this
Mexico
tournament.
over Marquette, which we mentioned, which was
Yes.
the worst kept, also one of the worst kept secrets in America.
Yes.
So I guess going recapping the bracket, obviously Iowa State handled Lipscomb, 82-55. New Mexico with the upset of Marquette. Bryant looked strong for about 5 minutes against Michigan State, then lost by 25. Florida dominated Norfolk State. Connecticut beat UConn. Obviously said Colorado State over Memphis. Then the
Well,
Crab
Connecticut
Five
beat
and
Oklahoma.
yeah, I'm sorry
Not
about that.
UConn.
So yeah, Connecticut beat
I know what
UConn.
you were getting at.
Yeah, Connecticut beat UConn this season.
Yeah.
At least on the court. Anyway,
I think we saw Gonzaga dominate Georgia as well. A game that I don't think anyone expected a 20-point blowout in that
I
one.
was not either. That game was
Um,
27-3 at the under 12 timeout, and that was absolutely shocking to see. I got
BYU
on.
made a nice statement win as well against VCU. I think a lot of people were expecting VCU, including myself, to maybe pull up the upset in that game. And BYU, as we now see imperative of what's happening for them in this tournament, they have really made a nice, strong statement so far in this tournament with that big win
Yeah,
over
and VCU
VCU.
was the trendy pick. I know you picked it.
Yeah,
We
I was
had
very high in them on a lot
we
of
had St.
brackets.
Mary's go over Vanderbilt.
Yep,
We
very
had
close.
Alabama go over
They
Alabama. With
looked pretty
Robert
bad in
Morris
that
was a
game.
very good game. I think Robert Morris got screwed out of that game. The refs really took them out of that game,
That
and I
did
really
become
thought
a ball at the end.
that was complete ref ball at the end there, and you really hate to see it.
Yeah.
Rocket Arena was really behind the crowd. The crowd was really behind Robert Morris, excuse me, and the refs took him out of the game. So that it sucks to suck.
Yep.
Illinois and Xavier, kind of a game, not really. In
Not
the first
much.
half, it was
Yeah.
really competitive, and then they kind of blew it open in the second half. So it is what it is. Kentucky handled Troy pretty handily. We mentioned UCLA, Utah State, and Tennessee beat Wofford. Then we got to round of 32, where I really thought at some point that Creighton was going to upset Auburn, and I
There
thought
was a
Michigan,
lot
and I
more
thought
drama in the
Michigan was,
second round.
yeah, and I thought Michigan was dead in the water, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Michigan has this huge second half, and they absolutely beat the
Yep.
brakes off Texas A&M. That was complete belt to ass that second half. And A&M is kind of like their football team. 30 round of 32 is kind of like an 8-4 season with a tough schedule. Yeah, you really can't complain about it, but it's not really anything to admire. It's just all right. So
Even
uh,
Houston against Gonzaga, they played a phenomenal game for the most part. And in the last, 5 minutes maybe of that game, they
blew it
really
open.
faltered and they let Gonzaga get back into that game and they barely held on to win that one. The
The
same
biggest
thing can be
miscarriage
said.
here
Yeah, go ahead.
is Florida Connecticut. That is the biggest miscarriage
I
here.
want to get into that game in a second because before we go into that one, there was also BYU and Wisconsin. And I mentioned BYU a second ago. That was another game where BYU was
Marred by
also
controversy.
dominating for the entirety of that game, and they barely held on. And as you mentioned, also some controversy in that game as well. I'm not sure if that was a flagrant foul. I think that's what you're talking about.
Well, people also talk about the travel that happened too.
Well, that was in the Maryland game. Is that what you're talking about? Also,
The Maryland game had the
yeah, we'll get
travel
to
as well.
that.
So
Yeah, we'll get to that one. But go ahead. You were talking about UConn and Florida.
Yeah, UConn, Florida. We were almost convinced that UConn was going to do it. They had a 5 or 6 point lead late in the second half, and just wind came out of the sails. I think they were up 64-58, if I do recall, maybe 64
Yeah,
60 with like 6 or 7 minutes left, and they ran out of gas. I guess they had a couple controversial calls. You saw Danny Hurley go nuts on the sideline,
yeah.
and
I mean, even
I
and
would venture.
off the court tour that too.
I would venture to say this because now that we're kind of looking at all this, I know I mentioned Maryland. They barely beat Colorado State on and this is a real stat, by the way. 95% of teams that get to 69 first, so first team to 69 wins 19 out of 20 games on average throughout Division One basketball. I don't know
Right.
why it's. I don't know why it's just it's an analytic done by I think Evan Biwa. I've mentioned him before a couple times, and it held true to that because Maryland was the first team to 70, even though Colorado State went up late. They had a 93% chance of winning. That rule still lives on for another day, I guess, because Maryland ended up beating them in a buzzer beater, which I think he was a travel. You could argue it's a gaffer. He picked up his dribble all you want. There's no gaffer rule
I
in
think
college basketball.
Yeah, I think there's no easy way to call in that play because you're either calling it a travel and ruining Maryland's season like that, or you're not calling it and you're ruining Colorado State season like that. So
And
there's no easy way of
I really,
calling it.
I really wasn't analyzing the entire game like this, and I saw a comment say, "Well, there are probably 20 other calls just like that if this weren't called." And it's probably true. You probably saw Maryland do it 10 times and they didn't get called for it. You probably saw Colorado State do it 10 times and not get called for
Yeah,
it.
I
And
want to
that's the way we're
also
gonna call the game. So be it. Is it real basketball? No, but if that's the way we're gonna call the game, at least you have to be consistent the full 40 minutes. Just because if you're letting it happen 10 seconds a game, you have to let it happen with 10 seconds left on the clock. That's just how it is.
and I want to go back to UConn also for a second. I get it that maybe Danny Hurley was upset by the officiating in that game. But UConn also was struggling to shoot from the outside, and that's a big reason why they lost that game. They shot 8 of 29 from the 3-point line. McNeely had 22 points. He couldn't shoot from outside. Caravan was 2 of 9 from the 3-point line. Solo Ball was 2 of 9. They couldn't shoot from the outside. They really played them in that game. As fans of a team that can't shoot 3-pointers as itself, and that's a reason why we lost our game, that's why UConn lost. If UConn's able to shoot from the outside, they win this game, and you can make the case they win this game easily against
And
Florida. They
you
could
can
have easily
argue the
won that
same thing
game.
with St. John's too, and you can argue with Creighton too.
Yeah.
All these teams really had a chance, and that leads me in the SEC. I said last week that God help me, you better see at least 6 teams because you are set up for 6 teams to get in here, and they got
Well,
seven.
no, they got 6. They got 7. Yeah, it's
But
an
yeah,
NCAA record for most of the conference.
I was expecting 6, and I guess Arkansas was the surprise at 7 because we kind of knew, even though Mizzou kind of had the heads up there against Drake, they end up losing. But Ole Miss beats Iowa State, and then
They
Arkansas beats
dominated that
Johnny.
game too.
Yeah,
They
but
dominated them.
this is what I'm going to say though. I'm not entirely wrong because the bottom half of the SEC got absolutely dog walked here.
Yeah,
Texas
but we
showed it didn't
expected that.
belong, but we expected that. But mainstream media did not expect that.
But again, listen, I'm going to say this to you, and I know this is because you've been biased about the SEC for the last couple of weeks. What are the team realistically in the bubble besides maybe? Listen, we talked about West Virginia and Indiana. We
West
know they
Virginia
should.
and Indiana should have been
We
there.
know they should have been in before North Carolina. So that's besides the point. So the other was one of those SEC teams the second to last team in
Texas.
Texas. Yeah, you could. Yeah, I'll give you that.
Texas
That
and
one from
Oklahoma
West Virginia,
definitely shouldn't.
Indiana.
Texas and Oklahoma definitely should have
So,
been there.
but the point is, regardless, you're going to have 13 teams in for the SEC if you want to make
12.
that.
Yes,
But what was the other team then?
I said Texas, Oklahoma.
Right, but I'm saying if also North Carolina deserved to get in, right? That's 3 teams. I know it's a different conference. I know what I'm saying is,
Yeah.
was there 3 teams on the bubble that you could say yes, they should have been in before those 3?
I mean, I would have taken
I'll give
North
you
Carolina
2.
before Texas. I would have taken North Carolina before Texas.
Right. That's what I'm
And
saying.
that's not even revisionist history. I said that.
No, that's why that's fair. Like I said, I think
And
it really the conference just beat itself up. It mostly the middle to the end of the conference beat themselves up to the point where they were just going to sneak in because of how the others were
and I
beating each other
and
up
I
the rest
had
of the
I had
season.
said the top 9 teams. I had absolutely no problem with
Right.
them being in the NCAA tournament. I said Auburn, Florida, Alabama, Texas, A&M, Kentucky. Those teams. I mentioned those teams by name. I said those teams all deserve top 4 or 5 seeds. No problem with those. Then I said Mizzou, had a great season. Ole Miss had a great season. They should be in too. They all had, 22, 23, 24 wins, somewhere in that
Right.
range. And then I said Arkansas, they were left for dead, started 0 for 5, and they worked their way back in the tournament. So I said I was even okay with them. Then when it came down to teams like Vanderbilt, I was like,
Mississippi State
maybe, maybe not.
basically
Mississippi.
of
And
what
I
they did
even
at the beginning
said,
of the
I
season.
and I said Mississippi State would be like the 7th best team in the Big East.
Yeah.
I said that. And I think the tournament proved right in that one. Georgia, I said they were in, but barely in. And then Oklahoma, Texas definitely didn't deserve it. But now, here's the point I'm getting to. I think that since the SEC, the metrics are so high, they really just lifted the bottom half of this conference. So when the bottom half lost games to them, they didn't lose as much steam as they should have in the metrics. So it has to be some sort of formula because no one was questioning the top 6, 7 teams here. Everyone was questioning the bottom 6 or 7 teams.
Yeah.
No one was saying that, Auburn, Florida, they don't deserve 1 seeds. No one was saying Alabama's bad. No one was saying that. They were saying like teams like Oklahoma and Texas, they shouldn't be in there. And Georgia, Vandy should be like bubble teams, like at best. And, they end up getting 9 seeds, 10 seeds. And at the end of the day, when you have the bottom of the conference go 0 for 5, you have to kind of really think, well, gee, is this really good? And if Arkansas doesn't get the upset on the Johnnies, you really have the bottom of the
You
conference
have
would have went 0
6.
for
Yeah.
7.
Yeah, I think also when it comes down to it for the SEC, I mentioned this. I think we mentioned this a couple weeks ago too. The bubble wasn't as big this season as it's been in other years prior. This year it was West Virginia, it was Indiana, it was North Carolina, it was Xavier. It was a bunch of teams like that where it's you make the case that they should be in, but they also have the resume to be like, well, they probably shouldn't be in the tournament because they are like for North
But
Carolina
I would
example, they're
just
one
wish
of
because
12
I wish
against
we would
good
learn from our
teams.
mistakes because we did this with the Mount West last year and we brought like we said, the Mount West is a cut conference and we let the bottom teams in the Mount West and
Yeah,
all get these less teams and they end up getting blown out. And now the same thing happened with the SEC. So what is it?
yeah,
If the ACC has a revival next year and they're all good teams, are you going to let let's say NC State get in as the 10th ACC team and watch them get blown out by 20 points? Like no one wants to watch those games. Not a single soul would want to watch NC State lose to 20 in a 6-11 matchup. I don't want to watch that. Do you?
no,
And you
no. We
gave
all
someone
want
like
fighted
and you gave
basketball.
someone like Gonzaga pretty much a bye in the first round because they got Georgia and they got absolute no pun intended, but they got dog walked here.
Yeah, I wasn't. I don't think anyone expected a 20-point blowout. I think you and I both agree that was not going to be a 20-point blowout win. That was just an anomaly in my opinion. Vanderbilt had that game won against St. Mary's too, and they just choked towards the end. Texas, the same thing. They had Xavier beat. They choked towards the end. Oklahoma at times maybe was showing up against UConn, but they were never going to win that game either.
Now, with
For
all
the
this
SEC,
SC slander being
yeah,
said, they're gonna have 4 teams in the Elite Eight.
right. Well, yeah.
They're gonna have 4 teams in the Elite Eight. I'd be shocked if they don't get 4 teams in the Elite Eight.
And I think before we go into that, the other games that we had as well in the second round, the game that I thought was one of the games of the week also, Oregon Arizona last night felt just good enough. It felt like the old Pac-12 games that
Felt
you
like a
got
rock
after
fight.
dark. Yeah, it felt really good to have a game like that between those two teams. Caleb Love getting another shot at Duke going into the Sweet 16. That's going to be a very fun watch, considering he obviously ended Coach K's career in the NCAA tournament a few years ago when he was at UNC. So that'll be a fun storyline as well to see in that one. Kentucky, we mentioned, is in the Sweet 16. They dominated Illinois in that game. Never understood why they were an underdog going into that game to begin with. They were, I
It's
think, a
because they beat
two.
UNC so handily. That's why.
I know, but still,
I'm
it's
sorry,
a
they beat
two.
Xavier so handily. Excuse me.
I know, but a 2-point underdog for Kentucky in that one that made no sense to me what to begin with. Illinois has been a fine team this season. I just think they've had some injuries along the way, and
They're another
Kentucky.
team that just they just ran out of gas towards the end
I
there. I know
think
they
also,
put together in the tournament, but they in
yeah,
the regular season, like the last half of February, they just ran out of gas.
I think for Kentucky also maybe you thinking, oh, it's Kentucky of years old, where like they lose these type of games, and this is kind of like a somewhat different team. It's not the fully different, but Mark Pope's done a good job with this Kentucky team, and now they're in the Sweet 16, and they get a familiar matchup in the Sweet 16, a team that they faced already twice this season, Johnson, and it's a team they've beaten already twice this year, which will break down a little bit. So I don't know if you want to go into the Sweet 16 matchups and
Yeah, let's
break
go
down
into
each
it.
matchup and what our picks are going to be for those games.
Yeah, let's go into it. I guess I'll start us off here. We're gonna have
Yeah,
number 6 BYU versus number 2 Alabama. Bama's a 5.5 point favorite, and the over unders at 175.5 here. I'm
highest
gonna
over
take
under of the week.
I'm taking BYU plus 5.5 here. If you don't know what BYU has been doing, they've been kind of transforming their program into the next level of college athletics here. When you go to BYU, it's like a full workshop on how to promote your brand, how to spend your if you get making the NBA, how to manage your money properly, EuroLeague, G League, wherever you get paid, how to spend your money wisely, post basketball, so you're not broke like a lot of these guys. Their agents spend like 40% of the time on NIL. They have top notch trainers, chefs, everything. So BYU is going to come here. They're going to be well prepared. They're well coached as well. They got a lot of money in the system. Give me BYU to cover, but not to win. They're not there just yet. Give them like a year or two.
Yeah, Bama is weird also because round one we talked about their game against Roberts Morris, and it was a game in which they easily could have lost. Referees definitely played a little bit of a factor as well with some key foul calls, but Bama needed some big shot making towards the end of that game, and then against St. Mary's, they dominated that game from start to finish, and pretty much for that one, their offense is still clicking on all cylinders. It was the first time all year that St. Mary's allowed 80 points to a team. I get it, they're in the WCC, but still, it is something to note of in terms of defense. Bama, we know, is a great offensive team. The problem is they're not a really good defensive team. And BYU, we saw what they did against Wisconsin. Great shooting has really helped them throughout the entirety of this postseason, but their defense could be very questionable at times as well. I know it's a high over, Johnson. I'm going to go with the over in that game. I think there's going to be a lot of points scored between these two teams.
I
Call
like
me
the over
crazy.
here too. Yeah, I
Yeah,
like
call
it.
me crazy, but I think that 175.5 could be very well hit between these two teams. I wouldn't be shocked if it's like a 45-45 game at halftime. Would not be stunned in the slightest. Something like that. We go into our next game. That is in the daunted West region, Johnson. The fourth-seeded Maryland Terrapins coming off that buzzer beater win over Colorado State will take on the number one seeded Florida Gators coming off that close win over UConn. The Gators come into this game as 6.5 point favorite. The over/under 155.5.
Yeah, I wasn't really too impressed with Florida versus UConn here. And I think that Maryland's gonna be a much better team. So give me Maryland plus 6.5. Remember, Colorado State was one of the hottest teams in the country. And analytical wise, like if you take a look at the advanced stats over the last like 10 games, they were playing like a top 10 team in the country. So Maryland had their hands full. So give me Maryland to cover here, plus 6.5. That's the easy money.
This is a good game. I mean, you got Walter Clayton, you got Derek Queen, Condon as well. Gillespie made some big plays for Maryland in their matchup with Colorado State. There's a lot of good star power in this game between these two teams. I'm really looking forward to this matchup. This is the matchup we were expecting to see in the Sweet 16 once the tournament bracket was announced, and I think we'll get a good showing between the two. I will go. It's tough. I think I'm going to go with Florida plus minus the 6.5. I think I'm going to go the opposite way of you. I just think Florida. I think everyone's expecting them after this game where they played against UConn. They played it a little bit close. I think everyone's expecting them to have another close encounter. I like Maryland this season as well. I think Florida is going to have to make some kind of a message after this game to say to the rest of the committee or the rest of the teams in the Sweet 16 and they're on for through the tournament that there's a reason why a lot of people are picking us to win the national championship. Like we have a lot of star power on this team. We have a triple-headed monster on our roster, and we can go all the way and get this done. I think the Gators will get the win, and I think they can cover the game as well. So I will just go with Florida minus 6.5, and we'll see which one of us has the right pick going into next week. What's our next game?
We have Maryland. I'm sorry. We have Arizona versus Duke here. Excuse me, Nick. Number four
Yep.
Arizona versus number one Duke. Duke's a 8.5 point favorite. Over underslate at 153.5. Give me Arizona. Sorry, Duke minus 8.5 here. I think they're just gonna roll Arizona. Nothing against them, but I don't think you could really stop Cooper Flag, and he had such a convincing round one and round two victories.
Yeah.
As John Fonta could have put it, you could have had all three of those refs in Baylor uniforms, they were still going to lose that game. So
I mean, it's weird because they blew out a team like Baylor, who had a very nice win against Mississippi State in the first round, and then they just absolutely crushed them after they started slow in that game too. I think the first 10 minutes they were back and forth, and then they really dominated the rest of the first half, dominated the second half, and obviously won by 23 points. And Arizona has had a game against Akron where they dominated, the entirety of that game. You know, that game against Oregon, they very much well could have lost. They were down 23-4, I believe, at one point in that game against the Ducks, and they fought their way back into that one. I think because of that, having to scratch and claw their way from a game like that probably takes a lot out of you. And yes, you do have some days off in between that game and going into this game on Thursday against the Blue Devils. But I think everyone is just seeing how good Duke is right now, and I think until I see something different in the next couple of matchups, unless Duke gets eliminated before that, I have to see someone play close with Duke. So until I see it happen, I'm going to go with Duke minus 8 as well, minus 8.5, I should say. And then the final game that we have on Thursday's Sweet 16 matchups, we have 10-seeded Arkansas coming off the win over St. John's, taking on 3-seeded Texas Tech coming off the win over Drake in the second round. We have Texas Tech, a 5.5 point favorite, the over under at 147.5.
I think we're going to go Tech minus 5.5 here. Arkansas had a good run, but I had Tech winning in the Sweet 16 over St. John's, who I thought was going to be better. So I'm not going to go take my Tech pick away here. So I'm taking Tech minus 5.5.
I think I'm going to agree with you, and I think it's because Arkansas, and I'll tell you this, I think Boogie Fland is probably going to play in this game. I think he's been injured for Arkansas the last couple of weeks, and he was trying. Excuse me, I just dropped my microphone. He was trying to play on the second round against St. John's, and he just wasn't able to get it done. He has a little bit more time to rest for this game, and with it being the Sweet 16 game now, I mean, surely you're going to want to have one of your better players in this matchup. I do expect a good game between the two. The problem for Arkansas is Johnson. If they shoot like how they shot against St. John's, they're not going to have a chance against Texas Tech in this game. The Red Raiders, they can shoot from the outside. JT Toppin, an All-American type player for this Red Raiders team. He's been sensational for them all season. I will also go with Tech minus 5.5 as well. So if you're anyone listening on, that's back to back mushes by us.
Mushes.
So
Yeah.
just want to might want to check that one out.
Let's go into the
starts-
Friday slate here.
Yep, go ahead.
We're going to have number 6, Ole Miss versus number 2, Michigan State. Michigan State is a 2.5 point favorite, over under slate at 143.5. This feels like a disrespectful line to Michigan State. A lot of people are saying with their analytics, so these type of teams don't go far, but play defense and really can't shoot, a la St. John's. I will take Michigan State to win this game because I don't think Ole Miss has it in them. Give me MSU minus 2.5.
Yeah, I'm having trouble reading this game because if you watch, I don't know how much you watched of this game last night. It was a late tip-off between these two teams, but for Michigan State's game against New Mexico. Michigan State had started off that game poorly. New Mexico had a 10-point lead at one point in that one early in the game.
Yeah, I was watching. New Mexico's really dominating them.
And New Mexico, for the remaining half, I think had one field goal the last 9 minutes of that game, or the first half, I should say. And Michigan State finally got some rhythm going. The reason why Michigan State got back into that game was transition points, and they got inside the paint a lot. They were dominating the inside presence of that game against the Lobos. Ole Miss, they're going to need Padula really to pretty much dominate this game. If they're going to have any hope to beat Michigan State and win and move on, they need Padula to go off. Michigan State will need Richardson, who had an off night against the Lobos, to go off as well. Akins has been good for them all season as well. It's such a close game, in my opinion. I think you could go either way for me and deciding who was going to win this one. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to go with Ole Miss plus the 2.5. I don't know if they win the game, but I think they can keep it close. And Michigan State's kind of concerning me with the way they've been starting some of these games because if they start off slow, I don't know if they're going to be able to pretty much recover in a game like this against a Rebels team that's playing with a lot of house money right now. These last two games that they played. Then our next game. How about this one, Johnson? I just mentioned this a few minutes ago with the SEC, an all SEC Sweet 16 matchup between three-seeded Kentucky and two-seeded Tennessee. The Volunteers are a 4.5 point favorite. The over/under 144.5. I mentioned Kentucky took both of the regular season matchups with this Tennessee Volunteers team. Do they get it done again and move on to the Elite Eight?
I don't know if they can get it done again, but I'm gonna take Kentucky plus 4.5 because this seems like the safer pick because it seems like all these SEC matchups usually pretty close. So I'm gonna take this uh, because I just can't pick against Kentucky. I mean, especially if Mark Pope's done a fantastic job, and even though I think Tennessee's gonna win, I don't think it's gonna be by more than 4.5 points. So give me Kentucky plus 4.5.
Yeah, the two matchups these two teams faced, Kentucky won at Tennessee by 5, 78-73 back on January 28th. And then the second matchup at Rupp Arena, Kentucky won that game handily and won 75-64. Oway is going to have to be the difference maker for the Wildcats, obviously, if they want to get this job done and move on to the Elite Eight. Tennessee has, I mean, it's made sense. They've kind of pretty much cruised throughout their first two games. Wofford, we knew they were going to win that game easily. UCLA was a little bit closer on paper, but they pretty much dominated that game too as well against the Bruins. I I always say it's so hard to beat a team three times in one season. I just don't know if Kentucky will get it done in this spot. But I don't. The 4.5 is the weirdest part because that could easily be a trap, and Kentucky, loses the game, but they still win. I think I'm just going to play it safe. I'm just going to go with the over in this game. I'll just cheer for points that can be scored between these two teams.
All right, and the next game we have here is number 5 Michigan versus number 1 Auburn. Here, Auburn is an 8.5 point favorite and over under slate at 153.5. I think this is really disrespectful to a really good Michigan team. So give me Michigan plus 8.5 here. Auburn has not really proved their weight as being the number 1 overall seed in the last couple of games, and I think Michigan will make it a game, but Auburn to the Elite Eight.
Well, the good thing for Michigan in this game, Johnson, is they have their two 7-footers that will be able to, contend with Broom on Auburn, which is really big because they're going to need guys like Wolf and Golden to make sure that Broom doesn't go off in this one. But you're absolutely right. Auburn has not looked like the number 1 overall seed so far in this tournament. They struggled early against Alabama State, and they obviously went on to win by 20, but they did not look good in that game. They were down at halftime to Creighton, and they did have a good second half to win that game as well. They need to make a statement in this game. This game really comes down to they have to do something, because if they don't make the statement, then Michigan State or Ole Miss is going to be saying to themselves, hey, listen, we might have a hell of a shot in the Elite Eight if we get a chance to play this Auburn team, or it could be very well could be Michigan as well. The Wolverines definitely deserve some respect. They've been red hot the last couple of games. Obviously, went on a nice win streak before the Big Ten tournament. They then won the Big Ten tournament as well, and now they've won a close game against UC San Diego. Fought their way back against Texas A&M. Had a monster second half to win that game. I think Auburn. This is a game for Auburn to win, though, Johnson. I'm gonna take Auburn minus 8.5, and it might seem crazy. I think for me, it comes down to Michigan has been, you know, fighting and scratching and clawing their way in their last four games. You going back to the Big Ten tournament. I'm wondering if the wear and tear is going to start taking over on this Michigan team going into a game like this against Auburn, who needs to prove something to the entire rest of the 15 teams that they are competing with in this Sweet 16 to get to a national championship. So this has to be, in my opinion, I think this is a statement game for the Tigers to move on into the Elite Eight and get one step closer to maybe playing for the national championship. And then finally, the last game of the Sweet 16, we have the 4-seeded Purdue Boilermakers taking on the number 1 seed Houston Cougars. Houston is a 7.5 point favorite over under 132.5. I don't know why I'm saying Houston wrong.
I think it's pronounced Houston. Like Houston
Yeah,
Street.
yeah, I think I keep saying Houston because of Houston Street at this point. I don't know why I'm doing it. I don't know. Who knows? Like I said, Houston's a 7.5 point favorite. 132.5 is the over under. What do you have for this game?
Give me Purdue plus 7.5 here. And
Okay.
I guess before you can get pick, your pick. I'm expecting Alabama, Florida, Duke, Texas Tech, Michigan State, one of Kentucky or Tennessee. Obviously, I'm not really sure there. Auburn and Purdue to make it to this Elite Eight.
Yeah, Purdue making it past Houston.
Well, no, I have Purdue plus 7.5. Houston's going to win this game, but
Oh, oh,
Purdue's going to cover.
oh! Those are your picks to just for like general.
Yeah,
Oh, I
obviously.
thought you meant
Yeah.
like those are like your picks to go to like the Elite Eight and stuff.
Well,
Some of them are.
some of them are. Like
Yeah,
I'm expecting you. Listen, I'm expecting 4 teams in the Elite Eight from
for
the
the
SEC.
SEC.
I'm expecting Alabama, Florida. Those are locks. Those are going to the Sweet 16. All right.
Okay.
I'm not expecting Arkansas, so you could scratch that one off. I'm not expecting Ole Miss, but I am going to expect one of Kentucky, Tennessee, so that's going to be three.
You guarantee
And
that would. Yep.
and I'm expecting Auburn, so I'm expecting fourth in the Elite Eight.
I think Bama. I don't know. Bama could. I feel Bama's weird to me because they were my preseason favorite to begin the year. They look. The defense is the only thing that
I mean, listen,
concerns me. They
there's
could
a
lose that game to
universe here
BYU.
where only one, if one SEC team only makes the Elite Eight, that's a massive failure for this
Oh
conference.
yeah, 100%.
It is a realistic possibility here. Is it likely? No. Is it realistic? Maybe a little bit.
Yeah. I'm gonna go with Houston minus 7.5. I don't. Purdue has had a nice run. They pretty much have cruised throughout their first 2 games of this tournament. A high point, they were battling with them for the majority of that first half, and then the second half, Purdue kind of in the last 10 minutes of that game really dominated that one. McNeese, they dominated the Cowboys from start to finish in that one. But I don't know if they've really faced a team like Houston where they're basically known for their defense. Cryer, I expect them to have a monster game for the Cougars as well, and I think they're also looking to kind of shed off some of the rust that they had from their last game against Gonzaga, where they were winning convincingly and they let the Bulldogs get back into that one, and they barely held on towards the end of that game. So I expect Houston to come out swinging in this one and end the Sweet 16 with a nice high mark and move on to the Elite Eight. So give me Houston minus 7.5. I expect if I had to pick who's in my Elite Eight, I'll go with the Cougars. I'll go with Auburn. I will go with Texas Tech. I'll go with Duke. I'll go with Florida. I will go with Tennessee. And you know what? For the fun of it, I'm going to go with BYU. I think BYU can pull it off. I'm not as sold on Bama as I was earlier in this season.
That is completely fair.
But it would be fun to see Bama and Duke. Like I said,
Yeah.
it still would be fun to see that.
How many SEC teams is that?
If I've counted correctly, I had Florida.
Yep.
I had Tennessee, and I had Auburn. So it's 3.
Okay, so 3's not bad. 3's pretty good for a conference.
Oh, and I forgot the Ole Miss Michigan State. You know what? I'm gonna put 4. I'm gonna give Ole Miss the upset.
Okay, so you're getting 4 no matter what. Okay, so we're both expecting 4.
I'm guaranteeing at least one SEC team into the Final Four with Ole Miss playing Auburn in that regional final.
So, do you think they could pull a Big East and get 3 out of 4?
Florida has a great path, in my opinion, right now. Texas Tech is probably the toughest opponent for them if they get past there. Auburn, we said it at the beginning of the season when this bracket came out, that this was their bracket to lose. So they should get in. If they don't get in, that's a travesty, in my opinion. On the other side of the bracket, I feel like it's Duke's bracket to lose. Bama Bama's obviously the closest competition they'll have left, and Bama's defense is really concerning me. They're not gonna if they can't stop Duke's offense, they're gonna have no shot in that game. I think they can. I think Tennessee's got the best opportunity on the bottom half of the region, but they would have to get past maybe Houston potentially, and the Elite Eight. So I don't know. I think you are at best, at the very least, you're gonna get 2. That's how I think.
I guess only time
I think
will
you can
tell
get
here.
3. I think you can get 3. And I think I might have had, no, I had 2. I had oh no, I did have two. I only had one. I had just Bama. But yeah, I think you can get three. I think maybe at the very least two, but it could be less than that. Could even be none. Maybe it's very could very well could be none, and that'd be really bad. Uh,
Only time will tell.
any final thoughts? Any? I know there was also some college basketball coaching hiring as well. I don't know if you want to quickly go into that before we wrap
We'll
up.
leave that for the end of the season. But
Okay,
just to kind of mention them, Sean Miller from Xavier to Tech, Will Wade,
Texas, yeah,
disgraced coach going to sorry, I said Texas Tech.
yeah.
Texas Tech is on the line. Thank you for that. Will Wade is going to NC State from McNeese State. We're gonna have Iowa's hiring a new coach, the former head coach of Drake, and West Virginia's head coach gets poached to Indiana.
We also had Nico Medved from Colorado State going to Minnesota. There was another one. Ryan Odom from VCU is going to Virginia.
Virginia, yep. And the whispers of Kevin Willard to Villanova live
I
on
think
another weekend.
as soon as Maryland loses, that could be a very big
Either going
reality.
to Nova or he's getting a really big contract extension. One or the
Yeah,
other.
and Xavier now is going to be an interesting job as well. I'm wondering where they're going to
I
do.
think it's a great job. I think it would be a great job.
Yeah, I mean we saw
I heard whispers of Chris Mack coming back there.
that'd be interesting. Where is he again? I always forgot.
Chris Mack, I believe, was where was he? I think he was at Ohio State or Louisville. He was at Louisville.
He's not coaching anyone right now.
No, he's not. I mean, I think he's at Charleston. He's at Charleston right now.
Okay,
Excuse me.
Charleston. I was gonna say he hasn't been. I see it now. Xavier interested in bringing him back. I mean, that would be a good hire. He obviously had some good success with them.
He had a lot of great.
Yeah.
Listen. He had multiple Sweet 16s. He made the Elite Eight. So yeah, but he'd be a great hire.
Hey, listen. As much as it sucks for St. John's seeing coaches like this come to our conference,
I need good.
we want
I need good
competition.
coaches.
Yeah,
I
we
need
want competition.
Listen, I don't want St. John's. Listen, we won the Big East now, so if we don't win the Big East for the next 10 years, I'd be okay with it.
I don't know. I don't know.
I'd be okay. Listen, if you're gonna make the Big East like a top two conference,
Another
listen,
decade.
we saw one. I'm not gonna be greedy.
I know. Listen, it was fun to see that game in person, but I don't want to say a decade. Maybe I'll give you 5 years. Give me 5 years. Because listen, once Patino retires, then you gotta there's another Patino that might be in the wings, waiting to take over this team. That's all I'm gonna say.
Richard Pitino, St. John's head coach, starting in 2030. Heard it here
Sorry,
first.
New Mexico. Sorry. Even though Minnesota should never fire Patino to begin with.
Never should have fired them. He made Minnesota basketball irrelevant.
Yeah, well, let's see if Medved from Colorado State could do something because he did a great job, obviously, with the Rams, and maybe he can get Minnesota Golden Gophers back to relevancy. Who knows? But yeah, we are now down to, I believe, 15 games left, Johnson, and the rest of this college basketball season with the Sweet 16, the Elite Eight, the Final Four, and of course, the national championship game. So we are winding down on this college basketball season, which has been a very fun ride. I know, obviously, maybe some people are turned off by there being no Cinderellas realistically in the rest of the Sweet 16. But hey, you listen. If this was the one year you wanted to pick the overwhelming favorites to win your bracket, this was the year to do it. I think it's the first time since 2017.
2017.
We've
had
the Power Five or whatever conferences, no Cinderella, Group of Five, whatever teams you want to call it, in the Sweet 16 or beyond that. So
yep,
it's been a little bit of time, and we even got history out of it. As I mentioned earlier, we have 7 SEC teams in the Sweet 16. That broke the old record for most teams in a conference to make the Sweet 16. I think since 2016 ACC when they had 6.
Yes.
So yeah,
I said I was expecting them to tie the record. That was my
and they broke it. Guess. Arkansas and Ole Miss were the reasons were the two measuring sticks to break that record because no one expected them to get to this point. But here they are. But Johnson, we're not done this week. We still have one more show, and it's a big one for us because as of Thursday, it is opening day of Major League Baseball. So it's going to be a very fun show to record for that one. We'll be breaking down the MLB season as a whole. We'll be previewing divisions, obviously going over some of the free agency news as well. We know there's a lot of news that we got to break down for that in terms of some of the transactions that happen in the offseason. We'll be making our World Series picks, and we'll see how each of our teams, we might have a special guest on that show. We're still waiting confirmation on that as well. But we'll see how our teams do going into the 2025 MLB regular season. Make sure you tune in to that show coming up this week. But for the Tonight Show, that is going to do it for the All Gas No Break Sports Show. We are now in to the Sweet 16 of this year's NCAA tournament. Some thrilling matchups coming along the way this upcoming Thursday and Friday. BYU at Alabama, Maryland, Florida, Arizona, Duke, Arkansas, and Texas Tech on Thursday. On Friday, Ole Miss and Michigan State, Kentucky, Tennessee, Michigan and Auburn, Purdue, and Houston will round out this week's Sweet 16. And next time we'll be live for college basketball. We'll be breaking down those matchups and previewing the Elite Eight matchups, getting one step closer to this year's national championship game. This has been Nicholas Pavona, joined alongside by my co-host Andrew Johnson for the All Gas No Break Sports Show. Have a great rest of your week.